So in this video, I want to take you through the 7 key questions from the Gouldings. Now, the Gouldings have passed on since, sadly, but the Gouldings operated, I'd say, in the 70s. And I'm not sure whether they operated in the 80s, but I'll put that down anyway. And it was Mary Goulding and Bob Goulding. And they did a type of psychotherapy which they called Redecision Therapy. And their book, actually, Changing Lives Through Redecision Therapy, is still available, and it's an interesting read. But they have 7 key questions that I think might well be helpful to you when it comes to going through the process that leads to memory reconsolidation. Now, remember, in terms of the process of leading to memory reconsolidation basically will take a core learning, or I always think of them as predictions. And then you'll get that core prediction. You'll find or generate some experience that will produce a prediction error. That creates a mismatch as we think of it. And then essentially what you'll do then is you'll repeat a reactivation of the old with the new experience that produces the prediction error. However, you can't really come up with a prediction error unless you accurately identify the prediction. So there's 3 basic steps here that we have to be interested in when we're doing therapy, which is going to help guide us towards memory reconsolidation, which of course then removes the trauma completely. So the 3 basic steps are, first of all, and this comes from Bruce Ecker, this little bit. So first of all, we need to be able to identify the problem. Second of all, we need to identify what that core prediction is. The thing that we're going to produce a prediction error, the thing that we're going to eventually erase. Now, because that's the target for being erased, Ecker actually calls this target learning. I tend not to anymore because target can have a different meaning, can't it? As if that's what we're aiming for, like that's what we're aiming to achieve. So I tend to go with core prediction as this bit. And then the final bit is once we know what the core prediction is, we can then generate mismatch information. Mismatch information in order to disconfirm that core prediction. And this will eventually be used as an experience. So these are the 3 steps for your roadmap, really, to triggering memory reconsolidation, which will then erase the trauma, the brain's own natural mechanism. So as I say, this part here, discovering what the core prediction is really important, because until we do that, we can't really generate a mismatch. And what's going to help you as well, of course, in terms of discovering that core prediction is knowing what the problem is. So let's get back to the Gouldings, because I'm going to show you their 7 questions and how they fit in particular into these first 2 boxes. So the first box, I'll draw a little line actually down the middle so we can separate them effectively. The first category is identify the problem. And so they've got 3 questions here that help us do that. And so you can just simply borrow these and use them with your own clients. And then the next 4 questions is all about discovering the core prediction. And there's 4 questions there. So we can split up these 7 questions, but I think they're really helpful to us. I've just been able to generate these 2 parts of that 3-part puzzle. So here's the first question. And if you look at the old videos or read the book, you'll hear the Gouldings ask this question a lot. What do you want to change today? What is it that you want to change? So they're basically asking the client here, what's the problem that you've come in with that you wish you no longer had? The second question is a really good one, and that is, give an example. And I always talk about this when I'm teaching an approach to memory reconsolidation, and that is, it helps to make the problem situational for a whole host of reasons. It makes it experiential, it makes it tangible, and also it gives us a clue as to what will be different and what situations will be showing up differently once the work has actually been successful. So that's the second question. So what do you want to change today? Give an example of that. So that puts it in the real and the situational. And the next thing that they ask is, what do you want instead? Which is a great question, because this diagram that I've often drawn before, you've got the client with their problem, and you've got what they want instead, and something is happening for them along the way to getting it that blocks that. And so these are the 3 core questions, really. What do you want to change today? Give me a real situational example. And then what is it that you want instead? And they're 3 great questions for identifying the problem. Now, the next 4 questions help us to understand the core prediction that is blocking them getting it. And the first question is literally that, really. And of course, there's lots of ways that you can discover. And I've talked about them before, like the single sentence technique. What's getting in the way of you getting it? Which is a great question. Most changes we just get. I'm thirsty, my glass is empty, I'll go and fill it up with water. Now I've got a full glass. That's a change, and it's a mundane change. But this one's not so mundane. So what's getting in the way of you getting it? And this is often rather some kind of scare. So that leads to the next question, which is this one. What do you tell yourself that scares you? The next question is, what do you do to cope with that scare? And this is a great question, because this gets to the heart of the client's problem, really, all of these. But what they're doing to cope with that scare is typically maintaining the very problem that they've identified that they want to change. And yet this is so scary, that they maintain the problem instead. So it's getting to the heart of this. You've probably heard me talking about it before, where I say the client comes into the therapy room, but not alone, but with this invisible twin. I haven't drawn that very well, but there's this invisible twin that's there. And so while the client is saying, I want to change this, there's also a bigger problem that the invisible twin is worried about, which is covered here in what's getting in the way of you getting it and what you tell yourself that scares you. And because this is so scary, we cope with the scare by maintaining the problem. And then here's the final question, and gets to the heart of what they were working on in terms of redecision therapy. What is the decision that you made back then that is being obeyed here? So let's just give an example of that. Let's say you've got somebody who, I don't know, they've always wanted to be on the stage, for instance. And even though they recognize that they've got some talent, they never move forward with that deep, deep desire. And so they might come into therapy and say, I've always had this deep desire that I've never acted upon, and that's what I want to change. I want to give myself permission to get on the stage and actually be my full self. And these questions will actually uncover what the scare is. And crucially, what is the decision that you made back then that's being obeyed here? And so that person might say, well, I was never really encouraged to be too visible. I was never allowed to kind of put myself out there. I would be slapped back down if I ever put myself out there or showed off or any of these kind of things. It was always viewed in that negative way, like stop showing off or any of those kind of messages. And so back then I decided it was just safer to be invisible myself and to not really put myself out there and not do anything really that might get that negative message that used to come my way. And that's the decision that I made back then that I'm obeying here. And so hopefully you'll see that these 7 questions are really helpful at identifying, first of all, what the problem is, and also how to discover what it is that's getting in the way of the client actually getting it.